have kept these topics so that you will have some icing on the cake as per the purpose of the module. So icing without energy component to multidimensional poverty, it's actually incomplete. So by all possibilities, we tried our best to give you the direction which is in sync with the module. Hence, the title of the lecture is on multidimensional energy poverty. This will be continued for 1.5 hours, and then we'll break for 15 minutes. We'll again continue for roughly 1.5 hours. So that for 3 hours, instead of 2 plus 1, we are making it 1.5 and 1.5. Okay. So coming to the content on multidimensional energy poverty, I think with great deal of understanding has been already addressed by Dr. Suman. So what I'll do initially, I will check with some of the points, review some of the points, but he has done it in the context of energy indicators. I may not clearly specify it is called energy, dimension, but indicators to a large extent is justified. However, when I say dimension, I will also specify why it is called dimension and who has suggested these dimensions. So the first half of my session is going to give you some background of understanding, some theories, some examples based calculations on multidimensional energy poverty. Then that will, after the T session, will be using exclusively with Stata and then the real data from NFHS, National Family Health Survey, latest round. Okay, so here we go. So we start with the basic understanding once again with its history. Then what are the different sources of data? Then at the end, as I just said, we'll confine our explanation with specific interpretations. Okay, so as we all know so far, the best way, in my understanding, after attending these 4 lectures, is it's good to start with the unidimensional approach, and have been repeatedly emphasized by the previous faculty. And when we extend our analysis to multidimensional, of course, it is addressing more realities, more issues. But largely, if you do a systematic analysis of different factors, how they are attached with individual or household choice functions, especially in consumption function, it is largely 1 or 2 indicators. Others and their weightages are not that dominant. So, in order to identify the dominance of any individual, we may do some basic calculations. Some of the calculations we usually do with basic factor analysis, so that with the eigenvalues or with the Scree plot or with the rotated matrix, we can able to find out which are the variables more important for us. Okay, but anyway, so as I just said, we'll be just reviewing initially what we have said so far, and this is the final day lectures, hence it is good to have some review of our discussions. There have been large discussions on understanding the poverty line. In Indian context, calorie-based or with different indicators, for consumption base, for environmental indicators. If you see through the Niti Aayog, we understand largely with calorie based indicators, whereas there have been very good suggestions given, or estimation for poverty line was given by both of the committees, Tendulkar committee as well as Rangarajan committee. The poverty line was actually defined differently, that we discussed also on the past day as well. However, so far as global poverty line is concerned, we earlier it used to be $1 per day, especially since 1990, defined by World Bank. From 2024, specifically mentioned about 2.15 per day. $2.15 per day. Going back to the arguments again given by the experts, that it's not just the poverty based on one indicator, that is income or expenditure. It is sufficing everything. Rather, we need to, as per sense an argument considered to be very robust argument, that it has to be conceptualized through the capabilities, rather than just income. Again, when we say capabilities, um, there are various ways by which capabilities are defined, but Sen has very clearly addressed how capabilities can be conceptualized in country context. So it cannot be just simply generalized to all countries. Hence, we have some liberties. Being in Indian context or in developing countries context, we have some liberties to define the variables, not necessarily exactly with the same word. Okay? Maybe some proxy variable or the indicator taken off for the consideration. However, we need to also cross-check whether the dimensionalities of that variable is correctly fitting into the calculation or not. So this is what I was saying. It's not just the dimension of one individual. You can target to the monetary approach or to the non-monetary approach. And so far as monetarily non-core is concerned, we check various indicators: health poor, uneducated, energy deficient, led to poor or poverty, or have inadequate housing conditions, etc. And not necessarily the family or the household is completely dragged by shortage of income. And so any of these conditions, any of these indicators, and its deficiency might lead to the increasing risk of marginalization and social exclusion. Okay, so hence all these should be considered under the umbrella term called poverty. Household energy poverty is one of the sub-dimensions of the indicators we mentioned. And household energy poverty status is also multifactorial type. So, and there are great deal of overlapping, as well as we all know that one is not just independently defined. Hence, the unidimensional approach we just say, yes, it is largely covering the size of the bubble, is actually explaining the role of that indicator or of the dimension. So, however, we cannot exclude other overlapping indicators while explaining the extent of poverty. Especially in the context of energy poverty, it is more relevant to address other peripheral causes or peripheral factors. So such as most importantly, so far as different approaches are concerned, I'm going to just give you the background or the historical trends of development of or the calculation in different time period, how people follow different indicators. So we will discuss about some of the methods like engineering approach, where they overally found certain percentage of population out of the total based on some of the few indicators. So I'll discuss in a short while. So largely, so far as energy or the multidimensional poverty and its sub-dimension is concerned, or through the energy poverty and its dimensions are concerned, we address through largely through fuel poverty or electricity poverty. But there are other indicators as well also explain the extent of energy poverty. So as I just said, mostly they are overlapping, and we have already seen and understood that how OPHI came up with the theoretical, grounded, and empirical sound concept of multidimensional poverty framework, and they provide the measures beyond the level of income. Okay, so we'll be again reviewing a bit, and then we'll explain systematically. Most importantly, with the same team, in a later year 2011 onwards, so Nussbaumer et al. Actually adapted the concept of the original one of multidimensional poverty from the OFT, and then they developed that is called multidimensional energy poverty index, and then it is now highly cited so far as energy poverty estimations are concerned. And whoever, in my understanding, whoever is working with energy poverty or even any soft dimension of the energy poverty, they are still referring to the original calculations of poverty estimations. Okay, so and the multidimensional poverty indicators or the multidimensional poverty index. Hence, our module accordingly, structured. We wanted to emphasize more on the core issues rather than the later peripheral issues. So Professor Suman has tried his best to justify the content. So now we are adding some of the information related to energy poverty calculations. As I just said, energy poverty it is again considered to be an umbrella term, and they included various direct and indirect sources of energy that a household requires, along with a major byproduct of energy poverty. So most importantly, so far as the consumption side is concerned, which we have been emphasizing, it is largely with the indoor pollution, and where that is based on the type of cooking, maybe with stove or maybe with other forms of cooking. And in Indian context, if you scan through the data, we will find mostly for the household perspective, it is addressed to the issues of indoor pollution. Okay. So otherwise, we are limited with other indicators except electricity. So in the direct energy source, the indirect energy we have already mentioned, whereas the direct source is through electricity and cooking. So for the indirect, they included services depending on some other appliances such as entertainment tools, and maybe for the tools utilized for communications and other household accesses. So I'm not specifying much on this. We'll explain more on the weights used in the calculation of energy poverties, because largely it was discussed. So the multidimensional framework given by Alcar and Foster in 2021 is largely covering the three dimensions of poverty. So those are of, as we already studied, on health, education, and living standard. So, however, the indicators, there are 10 indicators within those main dimensions. So and those are largely covering the plurality of the structure of different countries, especially I mean, if you read the estimations from Indian context, also you'll find the plurality persisted with the households are also well covered. Okay. So the methodology addresses the issues of plurality of imperfectly overlapping deprivation domains into a consistent parametric class of multidimensional poverty indices. So this is what was explained. So I'm not highlighting much on this. Just to review, we have already did headcount ratios, simply often the number of total people below the poverty line divided by the total population. And as we know that it is fairly easy to calculate and understand, hence Hence, there are some advantages attached to the benchmark or the line of poverty, that is G. We defined and will also mention in our calculation using the NFHS data in these two sessions. However, this is greatly insensitive because it is nowhere calculating the distance between the people and nowhere calculating the distance from the poverty line. So that way, it is important to check the other advances such as poverty, income gap poverty line. So this is what you have studied. It's not that linear in reality. So we have to go by the non-linearity structure, which is captured in the first graph. So the individual income poverty is calculated. The distance is calculated using the distance from the G from the income individual level of household level of income. Then G is their poverty line. So we can find out from the data which we'll be using today. So the total income gap, I'm using little different notations as against the previous lecture. So it might be creating some difficulties, but I'll just clarify that it is the interpretation still the same. So you may not find difficulties. It is also suggested that it's not just the gap you are supposed to calculate, you also need to normalize the gap by taking the total income gap divided by the J times N. Okay, so and the average can also be calculated with respect to its number of Qs. Okay, so whatever we said, it's still not completing the review of the earlier lectures. Most importantly, we highlighted that it's not just the income gap that matters, it also matters how we are actually assigning weights and to the weights to the people who are actually living far below the poverty line. So that can be captured if we can have squaring of that gap, and in some extent we'll also explain the alpha term which was used already in our previous calculation. We'll also discuss that higher the alpha, higher the weightage will be given to the bottommost sections of the society. So that will be capturing the poverty in a better way. So I think I'm not explaining much here. So we'll straightway explain the most important one where the energy poverty concepts are derived. So we are referring or revisiting what we learned from the previous sessions. Especially Professor Umar mentioned about FGT measure of 1984, ranging from we have this formula as well. Though the notation is a bit different now, but I'll clarify with its the FGT with its alpha. Okay, so we'll discuss about the value of alpha, and we'll also discuss about the role of Q, the role of Y, the role of the number of a number of people in that economy. So referring to the FCT measure again, actually it is explaining all three approaches. That is headcount ratio, poverty gap, and square poverty. If we control or if you check the value with alpha. Okay, so higher the value of alpha, as we already said, we can estimate the severity of the inequality in the society. and then like if it is completely zero, then this is nothing but our starting calculation, that is head count ratio. And we have mentioned everything here for your clarity. You can just see if it is zero, then that is simply q by n. If you go back and check, this is alpha is zero, then this is q times. So every time we'll get q as the value and times n is our first explanation. So it is nothing but the head count ratio. Okay. So second one, when we include alpha to be 1, then of course we can find out the poverty gap estimations. Then the third one, where we will be with the degree of the alpha to be greater than 1. Usually, in most of the calculation, it is taken as 2. So that is precisely called the square gap index. So if there are any problems in this slide, can be suggested. I think someone noted this.
The second line for the gap, please ignore that part. That part is not totally different. Okay. For alpha equal to 1, first line of FGT1 is perfectly fine.
Right.
Second one has some problems, so just avoid that line.
Okay. By n is there. All right. Q by n is there.
Just read the first one.
Yes. This one, right?
Just ignore that one and the one.
That is fine.
Next line, yeah. This one and the next line.
Right.
And it says as y not equal to this, that part should also not be made. Yeah.
Oh yes, it's not derived.
First one. That's it.
Fine. Right.
Yeah.
So because of some paucity of time, we actually cross check with
at 3 a.m. in the morning, so it's understandable.
and because of many other dealings for concluding our session today, so I didn't cross check with our team. So therefore it's for us to verify and then fine tune. Okay. So this is if alpha equal to 2, we can interpret the square poverty index as suggested by the experts, as we already mentioned. So building upon that FGT measure, Alcar and Foster include the, as Professor Suman mentioned and also emphasized, it's specifically added the counting approach in FGT, and that is in fact addressing some important aspects as well. However, coming to the multidimensional poverty measure, it's suggested by Atkin 2003. If we add accounting approach along with the adjusted FGTs, then it's actually called the value called the MPI. So we'll be also discussing in detail with the help of the data and also with the help of some simple examples. Then as I just started with counting plus plus the adjusted indicators, and why it is all about MPI. So what is this new MPI then? While FGT was a unidimensional income-based approach, Alcar Foster extended, as I just mentioned, including the counting measures. They extended these methods to multiple dimensions. So we will address that, how far a household is actually deprived differently in different indicators. Most importantly, the 3 important indicators that they are health, education, and employment. So counting the number of deprivation and individual faces in a household, we can identify the extent of problem of the poverty by poverty in a household by different dimensionality, including the major three which we just mentioned. So aggregating these deprivations, we can calculate, multidimensional poverty. So Alter-Foster method is unique by emphasizing the intensity of the indicators as well. So it can distinguish between a group of, four people who suffer uh, the deprivation or two deprivation on average, and a group of people who suffer five deprivation on average at the same time. So earlier that was difficult to identify. So here we are actually trying to understand how the household with two deprivation can also be differentiated than that of multiple deprivations using the Alker-Foster method. So some of the other important features to emphasize here, which it is called is adjusted headcount ratio, and it's specifically mentioned with the notation called M0, M1, M2. Will clarify. As I just started emphasizing the fact that these F methodology is not just identifying the indicators as we mentioned earlier, it also emphasizes the intensity. Okay, not just the incidence that was clarified, the intensity is also explained. This measure reflects both the incidence of poverty as well as the intensity. So we have clarified in all earlier lectures on incidence as well as the intensity, especially in the last two lectures. More emphasis was given on intensity of poverty. So intensity, we mean that how far the household is suffering from deprivation, and the percentage of deprivation suffered by each person of the household on the average. So it's not just the incidence of poverty; it's actually the suffering or the deprivation would also be estimated. So M0, which we all say, which is actually adjusted with some of the indicators to identify the intensity. So M0 is calculated by multiplying the incidence by its by its intensity. So we'll just go through one simple example, and we'll try to calculate what is this A, what is this H, how MO, what is the value of MO, and how we can interpret this value. Let me just clarify the differences between M0, M1, and M2. Then we'll use the basic example for further check. So as earlier in non-adjusted indicators or measures, not indicated measures, incidence were not, intensity of the poverty was not emphasized, but now one was in the adjusted measures, we are discussing more on intensity of the poverty. So in the adjusted poverty gap, of course, G matters, that is the poverty gap indicator as G matters. So this includes incidence, intensity, as well as depth of the poverty. So we'll actually multiply all these three to find out the adjusted poverty gap. Okay. So I'll just come up with this basic example in a short while. Now, what do you mean by the depth of the poverty? It's not just the incidence, not just the intensity. We are also emphasizing the depth. So depth is actually clarifying the severity, the extent of inequality among the people. So that is in fact not captured in the adjusted gap, poverty gap. We are actually, as per the suggestions, we are explaining how the severity of the gap or the poverty is also captured. That's precisely called MP. Okay? It's called H times A times S. H stands for severity. So we'll see how severity is calculated. What are the indicators we can capture the severity. So some checkpoint, I may be wrong. Maybe you have gone through wherever some errors are there. Please check and we'll correct it for our at least next episode. So M0 can be calculated with ordinal as well as cardinal data, which is why it is most often used. Whereas the cardinal data are required to calculate other two, M1 and M2. So there are some limitations. There are some cross-checking required when we do advanced estimations to check the intensity as well as the severity. Okay, so we don't have enough freedom to calculate for M1 and M2. It need to cross-check the data carefully. So with the example, let's verify one by one. So first of all, we need to check their dimensions. If we are citing different dimensions, is it dimension or they are indicators? Okay. So like when we have done some factor analysis, how many of you have ever used factor analysis in your work? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay, 6, 7, 8. Okay. So is it EFA or CFA? EFA stands for, CFA stands for. Okay. So ideally, the very basic approach to address the factors through EFA, but EFA is not giving complete directions of examining the factors and their relations. And most important is to reduce the factors, identify the important factors. These are factor reduction techniques. So, when we do a basic EFA, we can find out different dimensions. Okay, first of all, different most important indicator, and then we can find out the dimensions. So broadly, we start with the broader indicators as dimensions, and within that there are sub-indicators. And sub-indicators may not be defined as dimensions because the way dimensions are already proven, estimated by different experts, will be referring those articles also. So those dimensions may not be available in your real data. So for that, to estimate correctly, you have to take some proxy, okay, of the dimensions. So those dimensions are not necessarily dimensions, these may be your indicators. Okay, so hence the subdomains or the sub-dimensions you are mentioning, not necessarily their dimension, they are indicators. Clear now? So we'll just check these. I hope it is visible to everyone from different slides. So dimension broadly suggested by experts, we have just seen, it's education, health, employment, or living standard, or both. Okay. So in 4 important dimensions, there are indicators. There are indicators which explain the dimension. First one is about education, since it's years of schooling. Then we will specify how to define years of schooling, and then also they have specifically estimated using less than 6 years. We have some freedom also as a scholar. We can check with other proxies as well, whether those are also fitting well or not. We need to have sufficient logic or the rationale for giving other than some of the indicators if it is not available framework for data. Then school attendance, if child is not in school or not in school, then that will clarify the fact that they are different. Okay, so they are deprived if the child is not in school. Okay, and similarly, if less than 6 years of schooling, and for nutrition, the indicator, most important indicators that is taken is BMI. It is considered to be if it is less than 18.5, then the household is considered, or the person is considered to be deprived. Okay. So then similarly, child mortality, unemployment, access to electricity, and then water and sanitation. So straightway to answer access to electricity, easiest way to interpret is yes or no. Okay. Similarly, water and sanitation, it's safe or unsafe water. Okay, so we'll also check with the original data from NFHS and then verify whether we are right through these approaches or not. Okay, so maybe after a break time, we'll be discussing with the real data. Till that time, I'm giving you the background of estimation with some basic example. So another one is assigning deprivation scores. Deprivation scores are essential for interpreting the result correctly, and can be also utilized for a further calculation in the model. If we can estimate deprivation score against the person or against the in the model, then I think that can be also utilized for the calculations. So each individual receives a score based on their deprivations. Binary deprivation, can be interpreted in binary form. We can also, code them into binary after receiving the scores. Maybe in binary form as 1 or 0. Obviously, if it is 1, it's clearly a deprived person. Otherwise, not deprived one. And then scores will be also taken with the help of weighted sum. So different indicators are assigned with their weight. We'll also check what weights are useful, how weights are taken. I think Professor Soman has already clearly given indicators how weights are taken. There is no standard rule of taking the cutoff as weight every time. We have certain liberties, but it cannot be just irrationality. All weights cannot be taken. As he has already mentioned, I was actually not attending, but I listened all the lectures overnight. Okay, so all that. So this is how, in a simple example, we calculate with its respective weight. So at this moment, suppose a person lags in three indicators. Three indicators out of 7 dimensions. The simplest way to start with the equal weights, and as if there is no weights. But if you go by indicators of dimension wise, then we have we will get the fractional value of W, that is weight, which is actually different than one to other because we have sub indicator and sub indicators are not same. Okay. So, and CI is, as I just said, is our deprivation score, how it is calculated, and one, and then DIJ is one if the person I is deprived in the specific indicator HA or 0 otherwise. Okay, and weights, respective weights will be taken, and we will discuss carefully with the help of data. So the same 7 dimension as you said, if each indicator has equal weight, which is said obviously it will be 1/7. That should be multiplied every time to calculate with their respective dimension, whether they are at this moment we are actually making it in binary form, whether they are deprived or not deprived. If deprived, carrying 1 as the value, not deprived, carrying 0 as the value. So 1/7 times 1, 1/7 times 0. I mean, we are just mentioning that a person is deprived only 3 indicators. So only randomly just 3 indicators we have mentioned. So here one indicator, another indicator is the third indicator. Others we are just mentioning as 0. As per our assumption, through our assumption, that means CI will go with the value 3/7. Is it okay? Then we will apply the second cutoff, that is the poverty cutoff level. So a threshold K that determines whether a person is multidimensional poor or not. So that K, which have been discussed in earlier lectures also, the threshold K is more important, and through the multidimensional indicators or estimation, we can, or with the standard suggestions of the experts, we can take K value of the K. Okay, so maybe the standard K value, the line, overt line limit is given through different estimations. So those can be adopted as well. To recheck whether it is working in your data or not. So if Ci is greater than that of that K limit, the person is of course defined as multidimensional poor. Okay, because we are calculating the different distribution score at Ci, so that is actually exceeding that K limit. Of course, there is, and it is otherwise not considered to be poor person. So based on these, we will compute all those estimations, adjusted estimation M0, M1, and M2. Okay, so here is another way to define or calculate calculate whether the person is actually deprived or not, and we can calculate the scores. So let's assume that our case of 0.33. Okay, so if K as the limit, we set it, we can take it from the earlier estimates or the suggested estimates. So if it is 0.33, then how it works and who are poor and how estimations are made. We are going to actually check with each of the indicators, headcount ratio, then what is this, and if there are 10 indicators, and in the indicators with with their dimensions. Sorry, there are 10 indicators with different dimensions. We have certain weights. More or less, the weights we started are same, equal. But because of sub dimensions, our weights in other indicators are also though different from the first one, but actually they are same. Okay. 1/18, 1/18, 1/18 in other 5 indicators, 6 indicators. Now, if we have this information that person A, person B, and person C, you can see very clearly that who is deprived completely. Okay, just check once that here weighted score is actually of 33.33%. By looking at the person one, whereas for person B the weighted score is 50%, and person C it is of 27.78%. Now by looking at this, we can find very clearly that who is actually below or above cutoff. Okay, the cutoff is actually 0.33. Now our score here, we can see two persons are actually above the cutoff. Okay, using the weighted score. So the headcount ratio is actually of 1 + 1, and then the third person is actually not 4. So 1 + 1 + 0 out of 3 is actually giving us the headcount ratio. It is simply the number of persons, isn't it? So that's precisely of 66% or 0.667. Whereas, as we are going to use the intensity of the poverty, at this moment you can calculate the average intensity of the deprivation. So the initial check, we made it through the headcount ratio. So that was of 0.667, and then the whereas the average intensity can be calculated that what is the extent of intensity. It's not just the person that matters. The extent of intensity is 33%, 33.3% in the first column, and the second one is actually 50% intensity. So of course the third one is not deprived. So first two, so the average intensity is all about the A. We are going to use it. Okay. So 33%, 33.33% plus 50% divided by 2 persons, that's 4. So precisely our value is 0.41665. Okay, is there any trouble here? And what about the M0 by getting these two values? This head count H value we have already received and A we have already received from this example. Hence M0 we have already mentioned earlier that it is H times A. You know, it's not just the head count, it's the adjusted one we are supposed to carry with the intensity. So intensity wise, if you multiply, we'll get the value at 0.271. Now, let's interpret in a better way. Anyone in the class who can interpret this? Comparing these all three, first one and the last one.
So the head count ratio, it shows a percentage of 4, and the intensity is the average deprivation. Average over.
Average difference, but by value wise, we have differences, right? So is it logically correct? Yes. So a person, or even in a household, if your estimation is at household level, but the indicators which you have taken at individual level at this moment, so it's not necessarily just by head count. No, the overall level is determined. That's not capturing the reality. When we check with different dimensions, we have, at this moment we have actually indicators of 10, so many. So a person may not be of that core. Okay, if we check with other indicators as well. Hence, the value is lesser than that of the head count ratio. Isn't it true?
Yes. So the adjusted head count ratio is 0.27. Can we say it as a percentage or it is just a score?
If we can, it's at this moment it's a core, but if you interpret it in percentage form, that can be mentioned in percentage as well. But at this moment, it's a score.
We had a conversation yesterday. If you want to present the percentage, I can give you a two-line complicated state. I don't think we will be able to one. Here I state again. So the value of 0.671 is the adjusted head count ratio, right? We want to say for the expressed in percentage, the interpretation will be the core is 27% of the deprivation. And everybody being poor in every possible Indian. If you have a situation where everybody in the country who have been poor in every deprived in every possible indicator, what would have been your adjusted income ratio? Because everybody in the country is deprived in every possible indicator. What would be your adjusted income ratio? 1. This 27.1% is the percentage of that situation. And if you feel happy to present that way, every time write that way, but that is your interpretation. 27% of the situation, and everybody in the country is poor in every possible dimension. That's entire line to interpret. It's not very helpful, is it?
Which is technically not right.
Just also, when you multiply 1 centimeter and 1 centimeter, it becomes 1 centimeter squared. Here you are multiplying a percentage of poor people times percentage of indicators that they did, right? Both are percentage, so these are percentage squared. Please do not go in that way and trying to present adjusted income ratio as a percentage. You will just confuse yourself. You will just take the value, the unit 0.271 that lies between 0 and 1 as simple as that. It's just a score. Is that okay? Are you happy with that?
So thank you. So it's good thing, whenever we are writing a paper, so we should not, we can, but we have to again clarify very well. So better to avoid in terms of percentages. So yes, rightly suggested. So it's good to note. Okay, so now we are going to check the development trends or the genesis of energy poverty literature. What really happened over the time. So similar to the poverty of households in the beginning, the concept of energy poverty was not also measured on the basis of multidimensionality. We have already checked that. However, there have been a number of suggestions over the time, and it gets changed with the situations and in different experiment and in different observations. So we'll just check the methodological development on energy poverty over time, starting with um, the Ravel in 1976 paper. It was emphasizing on engineering-based approach. So that's precisely measuring the energy directly, or the energy requirement directly through the household energy need, and they specifically discuss about the households requirement for basic needs such as shelter, health, nutrition, and they evaluate energy poverty based on the actual energy requirement levels for household for capital. So that's simply called an engineering approach, as specified by Ravel in 1976. There are some limitations. Of course, this ignores whether the household's requirement is there, whether they are accessible or not was actually nowhere mentioned. And it is in fact a bigger concern for the developing countries and underdeveloped countries. Second one is by Boardman in 1991. We are just pinpointing some of the developments that not necessarily we are capturing everything, all references. Some most important citations we are just discussing. Consumption approach, which is usually largely suggested, which is long back already discussed, but there are some limitations. They use monetary measure of energy calculation, energy poverty, energy measurement. The average energy consumption of the household whose total per capita consumption falls below certain plus minus 10% level are considered to be income poor, or they are in the poverty by the income standard. And and this is, we are actually citing though energy, specifically on energy it was not mentioned, but actually we are interpreting our energy calculation in the context of the approach they have suggested using the consumption based measures. And within the consumption based measure, it was largely a monetary approach. Is it okay? So so again the limitation is with its dimensionality and its accessibility. This this author has also not specifically mentioned whether this is also accessible to the people.
So one doubts. The consumption-based approach, while I was going through some papers, it has been written that it is fuel poverty. So whether it is completely denoting to fuel,
It is
fuel poverty. So it is. I had a query whether it is denoted as energy. It could be denoted as energy poverty, or shall we restrict it to only fuel?
Since you are saying unidimensional approach, we since you are actually identifying one dimension only, we have actually mentioned in our slides. We'll specifically talk about this. However, since you are saying fuel, I've already highlighted that out of all the different indicators of energy, fuel considered to be the bigger one, covering more by its composition. So we'll discuss in detail in our next slide with its example. Okay. So then coming to other development, International Energy Economic Association, they discuss about dashboard approach of measuring measuring the access to energy. They consider electricity access, per capita energy consumption, and reliance on modern fuels. And they allow this allows cross-country comparison to evaluate energy transitions. The strongest limitation of this is that this doesn't capture the full complexity of deprivation, energy deprivation. Whatever the methods at the last we are mentioning would actually clarify more on this. And again, in 2010, International Energy Association included different composite indicators. So that's not necessarily the electrician access. We have now started mentioning from these developments. They use more indicators of access, access like electricity, per capita energy consumption, reliance on modern fuels. So these things we already discussed. So next one is the most popular one, but adapted largely from the multidimensional poverty indicator is none other than the NUSBOMA 2011. And they worked in the team, the Oxford poverty team as well. And we adapted this methodology in our own paper. We extensively discussed how different indicators of energy were taken, and how different variables along in line with the suggestions given by NUSBOMA can be considered for estimation. So if we will discuss this in detail as well. The last one in the recent development, but not much replicated in different study because of some issue, that's called multi-tier energy framework by the World Bank Group. So they not just include the accessibility, they also discuss about affordability, reliability, and various other features. And but the indicators which they specifically mentioned is very difficult to derive from different national level survey databases. We will discuss some of them. There are large number of debates, a great deal of debate. If you check the indicators from one article with another article, the literature actually divides very clearly between energy poverty than that of fuel poverty. Okay, so addressing your question a bit, if you check this Foster et al. 2000 paper, so you can differentiate these two arguments. And however, researchers in the past have outlined a significant difference between these two. So by differences are noted by their definition, by the availability of indicators. Then also, especially for the fuel poverty, it's largely emphasize the indicators for affordability. Okay, so there are, of course, in most of the articles you see similarities as well in the calculation so far as energy poverty and fuel poverty is concerned. Now, this is going to be more useful if you are thinking of replicating your work and then starting, or you are in the process. We checked in my first lecture also. I discussed about consumption expenditure round of national sample survey. Also, I discussed about health expenditure or health survey, social consumption and health survey. So I strictly suggested that based on my team, this is the one directly related to my PhD scholars work. So it's not the one I am completely carrying the weight. It is actually the PhD scholar is here only. So, Priyangu.
Can I just clarify this question? Source in the left side was missing. It is given in the references. Written by the head of to say to clarify the difference between fuel poverty and energy poverty. Fuel poverty is basically concept more prevalent in the context of developing countries, where we are actually not missing the access but the affordability, and it is more related to climate context because we already have the resources. You can say that when we don't have the resources, then we talk about the resources. But when we have the resources, we talk about what are the next limitations. So they are already above us in terms of resources. So they talk about the fuel poverty aspect. However, in the developing or underdeveloped countries context, we usually talk about the energy poverty. That's the
Okay. Any other observations on the floor? Maybe Professor Suman, you wanted to add something?
you are the expert.
But the background you have, I mean, you have set the tone is too good for us to, think further. Anyway, I think good that he has mentioned will be, the refined PPT will be shared with you. Okay, we have not yet shared. Probably Priyanka has not shared, right? We have kept it, for discussion initially. Then we'll share to you. The refined one should be shared with less error. Okay. Yeah. Any other questions?
On this side, energy survey.
Okay, Access is one of the survey, and it was in 2020. 2020 was also a full-fledged round, huh?
IRAs.
Huh.
So there are two energy surveys available for India. One is Access, and other is Access is basically panel data, but only for 2 pages, 2016 and 18, and of only 6 states. 6 most poor states as of NFHS 2015-16. And on the other hand, IRAS is a 20 states based survey that captures from, IRAS is a India representative survey. So one is actually going to analyze pan-India level data. They can use the IRAS. Otherwise, Access is an option, but it is an old data.
In our PPT, will also specify exactly for your proper understanding.
Can we also use the NSS, the numeric intelligence?
This is what I was just discussing. I was about to complete this slide and with clarification. So good that we already discussed this. There are two, but these are at the very infancy stage. We have not extensively used. We checked indicators, but cannot give 100% guarantee. He has clearly given that initial round was of for six states. Then the
basically this survey was made with the help of World Bank to actually access the multi-tiered framework approach that was propounded in 2015. And since then, this survey was started. The Access survey. Access survey was basically a pilot survey. So then it took the periods of pilot, and the pilot survey was did in 2020. So maybe they will conduct another survey in 2 years, but till now this is the data. So not only helps us to access the energy quality access, but also other dimensions that are missing in earlier data.
2016 was a pilot, so 2020 was pilot.
2016 and 2018 of the multi-tier framework. It was named like Access. Okay. And in 2020, they conducted pan-India survey. It was not a pilot, it was complete pan-India survey. And it was named as IREs.
Okay, anyway, we'll mention in your PPT, we'll be adding those sources very clearly.
Like for undertaking the registration, we have taken the variable that it has a fridge or not. Suppose a household, we has a fridge, radio or radio or television.
Right.
We are ignoring some laptops and all this stuff. Like how can we get the variable?
Okay. This is some of the variables which are not largely used. We know very well that laptop or advanced internet use, etc., are not accessed easily by everyone.
We have a paper on it. Since this study came in 2011, India did not have the access to internet that time, and India access to India. So, and still these are using radio and television at that point of time. So that was included in the sample at that point of time, not for India, but for all over the world. Now, and as it has been, we have been more penetrated with internet and everything. That's why in our study we have improvised a few of indicators. That will be coming in the upcoming slides.
Yes, we have actually added those upgraded indicators, which are actually utilized by the households in the present time. Okay, so.
Is it this thing only that they are the biomass that we consider as a residual pollution, or it is some time limit that they, like somebody is having LPG and apart from that they are also using this biomass. So what we will consider? Either we will consider the LPG one or either we will consider the biofuel.
We consider the primary means, when we say primary, it includes what we usually use. Suppose we have both, okay, but I am I'm from Bihar. So when we make litti chokha, we don't use the LPG and all. We have our own that what we say chula and
Chula.
aatu bana open fire. So, but we don't make it daily. We use LPG on our daily living. So we have to focus if we are doing the primary survey that whether we are what is our primary source. That's why in the surveys you'll see there is a question. What is the primary source of coke? So you can, I mean, there's a theory, no? Industrial theory and fuel stacking theory. Fuel stacking theory says that we can't completely move away from unclean fuel. However, what is our main source of energy? That matters.
Yes. If you go through our article also, we have specifically mentioned why the very fundamental requirement to a household and its source to be attached initially. Still, that is not completing the analysis. Your point is right. It's not completing analysis. We need to experiment whether this is fitting very well or not, and we can also give the justification accordingly. So even the weights which are taken here and will be utilized here, those suggested in their article, in Nasloma article and in different articles also, but that's not considered to be completely standard. We can argue also, isn't it? We have also checked with other indicators. So your point is right. We also discuss about what other important variables we should have considered within the indicator, which are more real time. It is not like radio or television. It is considered to be very old. But look at the ISDS data. We are actually comparing this with the single indicators. It was covered in 2011. ISDS data, the latest round is still 2011 only. So just to compare the data sets and by their variable, we had to take the common, very basic common indicator. That doesn't mean it is the final one. Okay. So, someone of you asked about consumer expenditure round. We have mentioned that all the indicators are still not available. All the indicators are not available. Out of these, around around 5 indicators are available. If I check that, I can show you. Go back to the slide, you will see very clearly that those indicators are valid and can be taken. Still, if you're working with NSS consumer expenditure round, we checked that it is still a valid database to work for this energy poverty calculation. However, for the health, social health round is concerned, 75th round, it is better not to use because you are not going to get many indicators. Okay, so let's proceed. So the MEPI developed by Nasroma et al. In 2012 primarily assesses the deprivation of access of various energy services. We have just directly mentioned which are the one, and by their dimensions, which are the indicators, and this includes a total of 5 dimensions and 6 indicators. So we are going to also check these indicators in our own paper. So we are going to cite, we have given the citation of our paper, and you can also try to replicate the data which are going to use it in our calculation will be helpful for us. So now you can just see for cooking, modern cooking fuel. You can see the variable name is type of cooking fuel, and the person can be considered as deprived if they use any fuel, beside electricity, LPG, kerosene, natural gas, or biogas. There's some of the cutoff levels are mentioned very clearly in that article. Okay, we will use this in our discussion in detail. Okay, so from our paper, as I just said, so this is the paper recently published. So we actually revised the MEPI and incorporates updated matrices such as digital access. Some of you probably asked about this. So also updated using some of the indicators called digital access, cooling or heating appliances, then and expanded appliance ownership to reflect modern energy requirements. So this is what precisely your question was. So we also updated some of the indicators, and it's very clearly mentioned why to use those indicators, whether still this is representing Indian context or not. And specifically, since the article is for the global context, so indicators should be also representing to the to many countries or to the globe. So, however, this is still not complete. We are working on this. Though we have mentioned, some of the other scope for working as a scholar, you might be thinking for your own work. So, like future researchers could incorporate public transport, access, or personal electric vehicles as an indicator of energy poverty. So, and then, however, due to the low penetration of e-vehicles so far in our roads and limited data availability, these dimensions were excluded for now. Okay. So,
Yes. Mentioned only personal electric vehicles.
Go ahead.
There was that because when we say we need mobility dimension, whatever mobility we have right now, it uses unclean mobility fuel. So on one hand, if you're saying don't have to rely on, we have to transit towards clean energy and on the other hand, we are saying we need a vehicle that uses petrol and diesel and everything. So that's why we have not included the mobility dimension to avoid that contrast between the.
So specifically on personal, why only personal?
Not personal, but electric.
Electric.
I mean, when we see the public transport, there is no distinction. Electrical and based on
Public transport is a better option if available because that will not only include the community framework that was mentioned in the maritime framework approach, but also compared to personal vehicles, public data on public transportation is available. Public transportable will be more energy friendly than the personal vehicle.
But again, it depends, which kind of.
What we have argued in this article, and that's why we have not included it. However, there can be.
That is why we kept it as future, prospect. You can change your directions depending upon the experimentation process.
Just ensure that all the pictures of what is this climate consideration like what kind of scope you are showing in that aspect of climate?
Basically,
Yes. Good. So basically, she's concerned with why still we have not yet defined the indicators of climate.
The data that we were using or the data that we saw did not include basic differences. Like earlier in 2005, when NFHS or before that, in HS survey we usually find data on how the tools of cooking are used, whether they have chimney or not, just to let the indoor air outside. But in the later context, those data were missing, not only in India context, but also in other country context. We just have open fire and open fire and stove and cooler. So we don't know whether the indoor air pollution is going outside using chimney or not. So that wasn't clear. So in that sense also, Ms. Gomez work was, got a little bit old. And when we say we can improvise it, we can add ventilation thing in our indicator just to include not only the indoor air pollution aspect, but also how indoor air pollution can be, how to say, how indoor air pollution is not being stored in the system.
Okay, then it's a primary
Best.
One good thing I had added the climate context that when I uses I give the when we have used this cooling or heating poverty, so we have used electric fan or cooler because India is a home country. However, depending on the country context, that indicator can also be changed. So there is scope of,
rational, some
there is
regions
an
to this.
improvement in the indicators depending on the climate risk.
Right.
Why I'm asking actually on this climate consideration especially, there are specific indicators which is specified by the state pollution control board and central pollution control board, and in each region they have the specific weekly and bi-monthly and monthly frequency like indicators.
Data.
They have to observe that, they have to record it. And when you are saying about household and then seasonal climate variation, then I'm just like within that region, whenever we're considering the climate aspect, climate will be more or less set. When you are coming to the indoor pollution,
When I said climate consideration, it depends on different regions. So suppose if someone is working in a cold, if someone is in cold region, they would not use the single kind of indicators that they use. So it's a suggestion that improvisations can be done based on the
like in the indicators, some similar indicators, so we can cross-check it.
yeah.
Which is sensitive to that particular.
Yeah.
Can be checked. It still varies from region to region as well.
For indoor pollution at the time, like for at the time of rainy season, the people avoid using the body mask.
Mm.
Use anything.
Mm.
That period of time, that indoor pollution is less as compared to the other seasons, like from summer or winter.
Okay. Mm.
And winter also they go less for outside for collecting bowel mask. At that time of point of time, they also use LPG. This was the climate variation at that time.
Indicators which captures the region. Okay. Probably some of the writings listed this way.
But I didn't get much evidence to support this, so I.
No, actually, this point, I'll just add, this point is actually derived from some of the articles. They indicated that it's not just confined to the indoor pollution to a household. It's also having some connection with the regional variations. So this is what probably, as you rightly pointed out, it's based on the season where people use different forms of cooking. All right, so can we explore later?
Are we saying indoor pollution? Let's say, are we considering community space a person household has community space to cooking?
Hmm.
That's not included. Can we do that?
Yes, we also check that as well in the household while conceptualizing. In fact, we got that review points as well.
Plus, let's say, are we looking the implication of indoor pollution only in household itself, or are we looking at larger social context? For example, if a household has a separate space and has chimney,
Right.
and that indoor pollution is not there. But there is outdoor pollution which may, let's say, has negative effect or may have adverse impact
Okay.
on its neighbors or
Converters.
who might be using,
Also that.
let's say, clean energy, but they are still sort of.
We have actually checked this indicator. Yes, go you also.
In the next slide, you see what I have included as an indoor indicator is not just the type of stove they are using, but where they are cooking it. If they are cooking outside the house, then there is no indoor pollution. Or whether if they are cooking in a separate room or separate building, then there is no. So I have included that. So in my revised index, it was included.
But yeah, this is understood. But the second point is the pollution that is coming out of that particular house, even if they are using, let's say, a chimney or a separate space. So it may have certain implications or effects on the neighbors.
Okay, basically,
That is
understand.
difficult to observe.
That is difficult
how
to understood. Idea.
Like,
No. Just out of curiosity, I mean, let's say, are we looking the indoor pollution?
Is anyone okay? I got your point. Basically, it has some adverse network effect due to pollution. Is there any indicator? In my understanding, in NFHS, they have not yet captured such indicators. Anyone has used any database? Kiandu, have you also checked this Access database where they have used these aspects as well? It's considered to be also useful. Have you ever checked?
Which aspects?
Basically, how far the neighborhood is also affected by the,
No, so
the extent of
in
pollution
aspects-
created.
In aspects and other data sources, they ask whether your neighbors use such fuel.
Hmm.
So they ask about you, that whether you get affected by the neighbors using this fuel. So the
In access database.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
a very extensive database.
Okay, that we have not yet utilized because of.
So using that access database, one can conduct that multi-tier analysis.
Framework can be utilized.
So that provides more that survey not only well using that survey not only you can access the accessibility but also affordability, duration. I mean there are various scopes.
Other monitor indicators which mentioned earlier in the slides, so can have higher scopes. Okay, so we have largely discussed about all sort of things which we did. That's not completing the answer. We know that there are even number of minor comments suggested. Hence, some of the comments which were suggested, we mentioned as the scope for future work. And there are n number of possibilities. Multi-tier index approach might be a strong, directions for us to work, depending upon what kind of frequencies through the data can be derived from the ground. Okay, so the data which we have just cited here may not be sufficient enough as well. So it depends on how we are working. So anyway, whatever we said, some of the references we are just citing for you to go through, and the original readings are available here, including the paper of this, also explained by Shuman on original approach to the measurement. So we'll be also discussing some of the estimates after this session. We will go for break now for 15 minutes. And we'll come back with the idea with certain fuel in our body so that we can digest the variable and data wise calculations to estimate each of the indicators. Okay, so let's